Every sincere supplication begins with the understanding that Allah hears everything. Nothing escapes His knowledge. The whispered prayer made in the darkness of night, the silent cry hidden behind a smile, the tear that falls when no one is watching, all of it is known to Him. A person may feel unnoticed by the world, misunderstood by people, or abandoned in moments of hardship, yet Allah is always aware of what lives inside the heart. Before words are formed on the tongue, Allah already knows the intention, the fear, the hope, and the longing carried within the soul. Many people think that dua must be perfect, eloquent, or filled with beautiful words to be accepted. They worry about saying the right phrases or making mistakes while asking. But Allah does not look at the perfection of language. He looks at the sincerity of the heart. A broken sentence spoken with honesty is more beloved than a long speech spoken without feeling. Even when someone cannot find the words to express their pain, Allah understands the emotion behind the silence. Sometimes the deepest dua is simply a heart turning toward its Creator without speech. There are moments when life becomes overwhelming and a person feels too tired to speak. Stress, disappointment, or grief can make it difficult to even raise one's hands in prayer. Yet even in those moments, Allah hears the unspoken cries. The heart communicates in ways beyond language. A sigh, a moment of reflection, or a feeling of helplessness becomes a form of supplication. Allah hears what people conceal and what they reveal. He understands struggles that others cannot see and burdens that cannot be explained. A believer may sometimes wonder whether their repeated prayers are being noticed. Days pass, weeks pass, and the situation remains unchanged. Doubt quietly enters the mind, suggesting that perhaps the dawah has not reached its destination. But the reality is that every single supplication reaches Allah instantly. There is no delay in hearing, no barrier blocking the connection between servant and Creator. The delay people experience is never in Allah hearing the prayer. It exists only in the unfolding of His wisdom. When someone raises their hands, they are engaging in one of the most intimate acts of worship. Dua is not merely asking for something. It is an acknowledgement of dependence. It is admitting that human strength is limited and divine power is unlimited. Through dua, a person declares trust in Allah's mercy and belief in His ability to change any situation. This humility itself becomes an act loved by Allah. The more a person turns to Him, the stronger the spiritual connection becomes. There are people who feel unworthy of making dua because of their mistakes. They believe their past sins have created distance between them and Allah. Shaitan often plants this thought to discourage believers from turning back to their Lord. Yet Allah's mercy is greater than every sin combined. The doors of supplication are never closed. In fact, those who feel broken, regretful, and in need are often closest to Allah because their hearts are sincere and humble. Allah listens especially to the one who turns back after realizing their weakness. Sometimes a person makes dua only during hardship and feels guilty for not remembering Allah during ease. Even then, Allah welcomes the supplication. He does not reject someone for returning after a long absence. Instead, He loves when His servant comes back seeking help. The act of calling upon Allah is itself a sign of faith alive within the heart. No matter how distant someone feels, the moment they raise their hands, they are already reconnecting with divine mercy. Allah's awareness includes every detail of human life. He knows the worries about the future, the pain caused by betrayal, the anxiety hidden behind daily responsibilities, and the dreams a person is afraid to share with others. While people may misunderstand intentions or overlook struggles, Allah never misjudges or ignores. His hearing is perfect and constant. He listens without fatigue, without distraction, and without limitation. There is comfort in knowing that dua does not require a specific place or time to be heard. A person can speak to Allah while walking, driving, walking, or lying awake at night. The connection is always open. No appointment is needed. No intermediary stands between the servant and the Creator. This accessibility shows how deeply Allah cares for His creation. He invites people to call upon Him whenever they feel the need, regardless of circumstances. Even repeated duas hold great value. When someone asks for the same thing again and again, it is not a sign of impatience, but a reflection of persistence and hope. Allah loves the servant who continues to ask, who refuses to give up, and who believes that relief can come at any moment. Each repetition strengthens reliance on Allah and reminds the heart where true power belongs. the believer learns that dua is never wasted. Every prayer leaves an impact, even when results are not immediately visible. Some duas bring immediate relief, others prepare unseen blessings, and some protect a person from hardships they may never recognize. Allah hears every request and responds with perfect knowledge of what is best. Understanding this transforms the act of supplication from desperation into peace, because the believer realizes they are always heard, always known, and always under divine care. One of the greatest tests of faith is learning to understand that delay does not mean rejection. Human beings naturally expect quick results. When they ask for something important, they hope to see immediate change. When relief does not arrive quickly, frustration begins to grow, and doubts slowly enter the heart. A person may start wondering whether their dua was accepted, whether they ask incorrectly, or whether they are simply not worthy of receiving what they desire. These thoughts arise because people measure outcomes according to their limited understanding of time, while Allah operates according to perfect wisdom. Allah's timing is never random. Every moment in life unfolds with purpose and precision. What appears as delay from a human perspective may actually be protection, preparation, or redirection. Sometimes a person asks for something, believing it will bring happiness, yet Allah knows that granting it immediately could lead to harm, disappointment, or regret. The delay becomes an act of mercy, even though it may feel painful at the moment. Allah sees consequences that remain hidden from human vision. Many people only recognize the wisdom of delay after time has passed. They look back and realize that if their dua had been answered earlier, they would not have been ready emotionally, spiritually, or mentally. Growth often happens during waiting. Patience develops, character strengthens, and reliance upon Allah deepens. Waiting is not empty time, it is a period of transformation. During this phase, Allah shapes the believer into someone capable of handling the blessing they are asking for. Life teaches that some doors remain closed because something better is being prepared. A person may pray for a specific opportunity, relationship, or outcome, feeling set, convinced that it is necessary for happiness. When it does not happen, disappointment feels overwhelming. Yet later, Allah opens another path that brings greater peace and fulfillment. The earlier unanswered prayer then becomes understandable. What once felt like rejection becomes clear evidence of divine care. Delay also tests sincerity. When a dua is answered immediately, gratitude is easy. But when the answer takes time, true faith reveals itself. The believer continues to ask, continues to trust, and continues to hope even when circumstances remain unchanged. This persistence demonstrates genuine reliance on Allah rather than attachment only to results. The act of waiting becomes an act of worship because patience itself earns reward. There are moments when a person feels exhausted from waiting. They see others receiving blessings they themselves have been praying for, and comparison intensifies their sadness. It becomes difficult to understand why their situation remains unresolved while others seem to move forward effortlessly. In these moments, remembering Allah's individualized plan brings comfort. Every life journey is unique. What arrives early for one person may arrive later for another, because each soul is on a different paths designed specifically for them. Allah does not delay without reason. Sometimes He delays because He loves to hear His servant call upon Him repeatedly. Dua strengthens the relationship between the believer and the Creator. The more a person turns to Allah during hardship, the closer they grow spiritually. If every request were granted instantly, people might stop turning to Him as frequently. The waiting period keeps hearts connected to remembrance and dependence upon Allah. Another wisdom behind delay is protection from unseen harm. A person may passionately desire something, unaware of hidden consequences attached to it. Allah, in His knowledge, withholds the request until circumstances change, or removes it entirely for the believer's benefit. What feels like loss may actually be rescue from difficulties that could have caused lasting pain. The believer may never fully understand what was avoided, yet divine protection remains present. Delay also teaches emotional resilience. Immediate gratification can create impatience and entitlement, while waiting nurtures humility. The believer learns that blessings are gifts rather than guarantees. The believer learns that blessings are gifts rather than guarantees. Gratitude becomes deeper when something arrives after struggle and perseverance. The heart appreciates what it once feared it might never receive. Faith grows strongest in moments of uncertainty. When answers are not visible, belief becomes an active choice rather than a reaction. to outcomes. Continuing to make dua despite delay shows trust in Allah's promise that He listens and responds. The believer learns to shift focus from questioning the timing to trusting the planner. Peace begins to replace anxiety once a person understands that Allah is never neglecting them. History and personal experience both show that many of life's greatest blessings arrive unexpectedly after periods of waiting. Moments that once felt unbearable later reveal hidden lessons and opportunities. The delay itself becomes part of the blessing because it builds patience, wisdom, and emotional maturity. Without the waiting, the growth would never occur. The heart finds calm when it accepts that Allah's response is always active, even when invisible. Every dua sets divine processes in motion beyond human awareness. Circumstances align, obstacles move, and unseen factors change in preparation for the best possible outcome. What appears silent on the surface may actually be a time of profound divine activity. Understanding that delay is not rejection allows a believer to replace despair with hope. Instead of assuming their prayer has been ignored, they begin to see waiting as evidence that Allah is carefully arranging events according to perfect knowledge. Trust grows stronger, patience becomes easier, and the believer continues making dua with confidence that every request is heard and handled with mercy, wisdom, and purpose. Human beings naturally desire control over their lives. They plan carefully, set expectations, and imagine specific outcomes that they believe will bring happiness and security. When making dua, people often carry a clear picture in their minds of how and when their prayers should be answered. They ask Allah with urgency because their emotions are tied to immediate relief. Yet true peace begins when a believer learns to trust Allah's wisdom more than their own understanding. Trusting Allah's wisdom means accepting that human knowledge is limited. A person sees only the present moment, while Allah sees the past, present, and future together. What appears beneficial today may carry hidden consequences tomorrow. The believer may feel certain that a particular opportunity, relationship, or solution is exactly what they need, but Allah understands realities that remain unseen. He knows what will strengthen faith, what will protect the heart, and what will ultimately lead to lasting success. Urgency comes from human weakness. When faced with hardship, people want quick answers because pain feels unbearable. Waiting becomes difficult and anxiety grows stronger with every passing day. In these moments, the heart struggles between hope and fear. Trusting Allah requires shifting focus away from immediate results toward confidence in divine planning. It means believing that Allah is not delaying out of neglect, but acting according to wisdom beyond human comprehension. Many struggles in life arise because people attach their peace to specific outcomes rather than to Allah Himself. When expectations are unmet, disappointment feels overwhelming. However, when trust is placed in Allah rather than in a particular result, peace becomes stable regardless of circumstances. The believer learns that goodness is not limited to one path. Allah can create solutions in ways that were never imagined. What seemed impossible can become easy through divine intervention. Trusting Allah's wisdom also requires humility. It means admitting that human desires are not always aligned with what is truly beneficial. Sometimes people ask for things driven by emotion, impatience, or comparison with others. Allah, in His mercy, may withhold or change the outcome because He knows the deeper needs of the soul. Accepting this reality transforms disappointment into submission and frustration into contentment. Life repeatedly demonstrates that human plans often fail despite careful effort. Doors close unexpectedly, opportunities disappear, and situations change without warning. These moments can shake confidence and create confusion. Yet they also remind believers that ultimate control belongs to Allah alone. Trust grows when a person realizes that reliance on personal planning alone cannot guarantee success. True security comes from surrendering outcomes to Allah while continuing to strive responsibly. There are times when Allah answers a dua differently from what was requested. A person may pray for a specific job, but receive a better opportunity elsewhere. Someone may ask for a particular relationship that does not work out, only to later discover a healthier and more fulfilling connection. At first, these changes may feel painful or confusing, but they reflect divine wisdom guiding the believer towards something more suitable. Trust does not mean abandoning effort. Islam teaches balance between action and reliance. A believer works hard, makes decisions, and seeks improvement, while understanding that results ultimately belong to Allah. This balance protects the heart from arrogance during success and despair during difficulty. Effort becomes an act of worship. and outcomes become opportunities for gratitude or patience. Anxiety often arises from trying to predict the future. People worry about what might happen, fearing loss, failure, or uncertainty. Trusting Allah's wisdom allows the heart to release excessive worry. When a believer understands that Allah controls every outcome with perfect knowledge and mercy, fear begins to lose its power. The future no longer feels threatening because it rests in the hands of the most compassionate. Trust deepens through reflection on past experiences. Many individuals can recall moments when they desperately wanted something that never happened, only to later realize that its absence protected them from harm. These realizations strengthen faith and remind the believer that Allah's decisions consistently carry hidden goodness. Remembering past blessings helps the heart remain calm during present uncertainty. Developing trust is a gradual process. It grows through consistent remembrance of Allah, regular dua, and reflection upon divine mercy. Each challenge becomes an opportunity to practice surrender. Instead of asking only for specific outcomes, the believer begins to ask Allah for what is best, even if it differs from personal desire. This shift transforms dua from a demand into an expression of complete reliance. When trust in Allah's wisdom becomes strong, patience feels lighter. Waiting no longer feels like punishment, but like part of a meaningful journey guided by divine care. The believer stops questioning why things are not happening quickly and instead focuses on maintaining faith and gratitude. Inner peace emerges because certainty replaces doubt. True reliance allows a person to move forward with hope rather than fear. They continue making dua with confidence, knowing that Allah's plan is never careless or random. Even when circumstances appear uncertain, the believer remains assured that every delay, every change, and every unexpected turn is part of a carefully designed path shaped by infinite wisdom and mercy. Patience and reliance upon Allah are deeply connected qualities that transform the way a believer experiences life's challenges. When a person makes dua, they are not only asking for a result, but also entering a journey that requires endurance, faith, and trust. Patience, known as Sabr, is not simply waiting without emotion. It is maintaining faith while facing uncertainty, continuing to hope even when answers are not immediately visible. Tawakkul, complete reliance upon Allah, strengthens this patience by reminding the believer that outcomes are always under divine control. Life naturally brings moments of hardship, confusion, and delay. During these periods, emotions can become overwhelming. Fear, sadness, or frustration may try to dominate the heart. Patience allows a believer to remain steady despite these feelings. It does not mean the absence of pain, but the refusal to lose faith because of pain. A patient person continues to turn toward Allah, believing that every difficulty carries purpose and that relief will arrive at the right time. Tawakkul complements patience by shifting the burden away from human shoulders. People often exhaust themselves trying to control situations beyond their ability. They worry endlessly about results, replay problems in their minds, and feel responsible for outcomes they cannot influence. True reliance on Allah releases this heavy pressure. The believer continues to make effort while trusting that Allah will handle what lies beyond human power. This trust brings calmness even in uncertain circumstances. When patience and tawakkul combine, waiting becomes meaningful. Instead of viewing delay as wasted time, the believer recognizes it as an opportunity for spiritual growth. Each moment of waiting strengthens faith, increases humility, and deepens awareness of Allah's presence. The heart learns to remain connected to Allah not only during success but also during struggle. This continuous connection transforms ordinary waiting into worship. Patience also protects the believer from despair. Without sabr, repeated difficulties can lead to hopelessness. A person may feel abandoned or believe that their efforts and prayers are useless. Patience reminds the heart that Allah never forgets His servants. Every hardship carries reward, every moment of endurance is seen, and every tear shed in sincerity holds value. The believer understands that trials are not signs of rejection but opportunities for elevation. Reliance upon Allah encourages action rather than passivity. Tawakkul does not mean doing nothing and expecting miracles. It involves taking responsible steps while placing full trust in Allah's decision. A believer strives, plans, and works hard but does not allow outcomes to control their emotional stability. Success brings gratitude and setbacks bring patience because both are recognized as parts of Allah's wisdom. During difficult times, Patience prevents impulsive reactions that may lead to regret. Emotional decisions made in frustration often create additional problems. Sabr allows a person to pause, reflect, and respond with wisdom rather than anger or desperation. Through patience, the believer learns self-control and emotional balance. Challenges become lessons in maturity rather than sources of lasting damage. Tawakkul also strengthens hope. When reliance on Allah becomes sincere, fear of the future decreases. The believer knows that no situation is beyond Allah's ability to change. Even when circumstances appear impossible, trust in Allah keeps hope alive. This hope becomes a source of resilience, enabling the believer to continue making dua with confidence rather than anxiety. Many people believe patience means weakness or resignation, but true sabr requires great strength. It takes courage to remain hopeful when results are delayed and strength to maintain faith when answers are unseen. Patience transforms suffering into growth by allowing the believer to endure without losing spiritual direction. It teaches acceptance without surrendering effort. Reliance upon Allah also nurtures gratitude. When a person trusts Allah completely, they begin to recognize blessings even during hardship. Small moments of ease, hidden acts of protection, and subtle signs of mercy become more visible. Gratitude softens the heart and prevents negativity from taking root. The believer learns that Allah's care is present even when life feels challenging. The practice of patience and tawakkul reshapes a person's relationship with dua. Instead of making supplication only as a desperate request for change, dua becomes an ongoing conversation with Allah. The believer asks, waits, trusts, and continues believing that Allah is responding in ways perfectly suited to their needs. The process itself becomes spiritually fulfilling. Over time, patience builds inner stability. External circumstances may fluctuate, but the believer's faith remains steady. They learn that happiness does not depend solely on immediate outcomes, but on closeness to Allah. Tawakkul provides emotional security because reliance shifts from unstable worldly factors to the constant mercy of Allah. Through patience and reliance, the believer discovers that waiting is not empty. Every moment of endurance carries reward. Every act of trust strengthens faith, and every sincere dawah brings the heart closer to Allah. The journey of patience becomes a path towards spiritual strength, deeper understanding, and unwavering confidence that Allah's response is unfolding exactly as it should, according to His perfect knowledge and mercy. One of the most comforting realities about supplication is understanding that Allah always responds to every sincere dua, but His response does not always appear in the exact form a person expects. Human beings often imagine acceptance as receiving precisely what they asked for at the exact moment they desire it. When events unfold differently, confusion and disappointment may arise. However, divine response operates through wisdom far greater than human perception. Allah answers every prayer in one of three beautiful ways, each filled with mercy and care. The first way Allah answers a dua is by granting exactly what the believer asks for. Sometimes the response comes quickly, bringing relief, joy, and clarity. A person prays for guidance and suddenly finds direction. Someone struggling with hardship asks for ease and experiences unexpected solutions. These moments strengthen faith because the connection between supplication and outcome feels clear and immediate. The believer recognizes Allah's generosity and feels deeply grateful for the blessing received. When a prayer is granted directly, it serves as a reminder of Allah's power and closeness. The believer understands that no problem is too difficult and no request is too small for Allah. Even simple needs and personal desires matter to Him. This realization encourages continued supplication because the heart learns that Allah listens attentively and responds generously. Gratitude becomes essential in these moments, as recognizing the blessing strengthens humility and appreciation. The second way Allah swears a dua is by replacing the request with something better. This response often goes unnoticed at first because people focus only on the specific outcome they desired. A person may pray for one opportunity but receive another that initially seems unrelated. Over time, however, they begin to realize that what Allah provided brought greater benefit, stability, or happiness than what they originally sought. Human understanding is limited by emotion and immediate perspective. People sometimes desire things that appear perfect on the surface but carry hidden challenges. Allah, knowing the unseen, redirects the believer toward what truly benefits them. What feels like an unanswered prayer may actually be a carefully guided transformation leading to greater good. The believer later recognizes that Allah's choice protected them from regret or hardship. This replacement often teaches trust. When a person accepts that Allah's wisdom surpasses their own expectations, they begin to surrender control over outcomes. Instead of insisting on specific results, they learn to ask Allah for what is best. This mindset brings peace because the believer no longer fears disappointment. Every outcome becomes meaningful, knowing that divine wisdom shapes the path ahead. The third way Allah answers a dua is by removing a hidden hardship or protecting the believer from unseen harm. This response is the most subtle because the person may never realize what danger was avoided. A believer might pray for success, safety, or relief without knowing that their supplication prevented a future difficulty. Allah's protection operates quietly, shielding His servant from trials that could have caused pain or loss. There are countless situations where people later reflect on events that did not happen and realize how fortunate they were. Missed opportunities, delayed plans, or unexpected changes sometimes prevent greater problems. These moments reveal Allah's mercy working behind the scenes. The believer understands that acceptance of dua is not limited to visible blessings. It also includes unseen protection. Recognizing these three forms of response transforms the way a believer views supplication. Instead of measuring acceptance solely through immediate results, faith expands to include trust in Allah's broader plan. The believer continues making dua with confidence, knowing that every prayer produces benefit in one form or another. This understanding removes feelings of rejection and replaces them with hope. Dua becomes a source of comfort rather than anxiety. A person no longer fears that their prayers are ignored because they understand that Allah always responds with wisdom. Even when answers are delayed or appear different from expectations, the believer remains assured that goodness is unfolding. Faith shifts from demanding outcomes to trusting divine care. This perspective also strengthens patience. When a person knows that every dua is answered in some way, waiting becomes easier. The heart remains calm, believing that Allah's response is already in motion. Whether through direct blessing, a better replacement, or hidden protection, every supplication carries value and reward. Understanding these responses encourages consistency in dua. The believer continues asking Allah during ease and hardship, recognizing that every conversation with Him brings spiritual benefit. Supplication becomes an act of closeness rather than desperation. It reminds the believer that Allah is actively involved in their life, guiding, protecting, and providing according to perfect knowledge. Through this realization, the believer learns that acceptance of dua is broader and more compassionate than human expectation. Allah's response always contains mercy, even when its for may is not immediately understood. Each prayer strengthens the relationship between servant and creator, reinforcing trust that nothing asked sincerely is ever lost, ignored, or wasted in the sight of Allah. Consistency in making dua reflects the depth of a believer's faith and their understanding of Allah's mercy. Many people begin their supplications with strong hope, especially during moments of hardship. But as time passes without visible change, motivation weakens. Doubt slowly replaces certainty, and some individuals reduce their prayers or stop asking altogether. Yet one of the greatest spiritual realities is that a person may be extremely close to acceptance at the very moment they feel most discouraged. Continuing to make dua, even when results are unseen, demonstrates trust in Allah's promise and confidence in His perfect timing. Human beings often measure progress through visible signs. When circumstances remain unchanged, it becomes easy to assume that nothing is happening. However, divine response operates beyond human perception. While a believer continues asking, Allah may already be arranging events, softening hearts, removing obstacles, or preparing opportunities that will eventually lead to the answer. The unseen world is constantly moving according to Allah's command, even when outward reality appears still. Persistence in dawah shows humility. By repeatedly turning to Allah, a person acknowledges their dependence and recognizes that true power belongs only to Him. Each supplication renews the connection between servant and creator. This repeated turning back to Allah strengthens faith because it reminds the heart where help truly comes from. Rather than relying solely on personal ability or worldly solutions, the believer continually seeks divine assistance. There are moments when exhaustion makes it difficult to continue asking. a person may feel. Emotionally drained after long periods of waiting, they may wonder whether their voice matters or whether their prayers have reached acceptance. These feelings are part of the human experience, yet they should not lead to abandoning dua. Often breakthrough arrives after perseverance through the most challenging stage of waiting. Just as dawn appears after the darkest part of the night, relief often follows moments when hope feels weakest. Consistency in dua also builds spiritual discipline. It teaches patience, resilience, and sincerity. When someone continues praying despite uncertainty, their faith becomes stronger and more mature. The believer learns to worship Allah not only for immediate results, but out of genuine devotion. Dua transforms from a temporary reaction to hardship into a life habit of connection with Allah. Another wisdom behind persistent supplication is that Allah loves to hear His servant call upon Him. Every time a believer raises their hands, they are engaging in an intimate act of worship. Allah appreciates the servant who repeatedly turns to Him, expressing hope and reliance. The act of asking itself carries immense reward regardless of how quickly the answer appears. Even when the outcome is delayed, the believer gains spiritual closeness through continuous remembrance. Many people abandon their dawah just before circumstances begin to change. They interpret the delay as failure rather than preparation. Yet history and personal experiences often reveal that success comes after sustained patience. Opportunities appear suddenly after long periods of struggle. Solutions emerge unexpectedly, and relief arrives when it seemed impossible. The believer who continues making dua remains spiritually prepared to recognize and receive these blessings. Persistence also protects the heart from despair. Giving up on dua can lead to feelings of isolation and hopelessness, while continuing to ask keeps hope alive. Hope is essential for emotional and spiritual well-being. It reminds the believer that Allah's mercy is limitless, and that no situation is beyond His ability to transform. Even small acts of supplication renew optimism and strengthen inner peace. Consistent dua encourages self-reflection as well. During the waiting period, believers often improve their character, increase acts of worship, seek forgiveness, and draw closer to Allah. These changes may be part of the preparation for acceptance. Allah not only answers prayers but also refines the believer through the process of asking. The journey itself becomes transformative, shaping a stronger and more spiritually aware individual. There is also immense comfort in knowing that Allah rewards every sincere supplication, even those whose outcomes differ from expectations. Nothing is wasted. Every raised hand, every whispered prayer, and every moment of hope carries reward. Understanding this removes fear of disappointment and allows the believer to continue asking without hesitation. Without hesitation, the believer learns to make dua with certainty rather than doubt. Confidence in Allah's mercy replaces anxiety about timing. Instead of asking once and waiting passively, they maintain an ongoing conversation with Allah, trusting that each supplication brings them closer to relief. Faith grows stronger because persistence reinforces belief in divine generosity. Continuing to make dua reflects unwavering hope. It shows belief that Allah is capable of changing circumstances at any moment. No hardship lasts forever, and no situation remains beyond divine intervention. The believer who persists understands that acceptance may be nearer than imagined, that unseen blessings may already be unfolding, and that the moment of answer often arrives when patience, trust, and sincere supplication have reached their fullest expression.